We have great support from Republicans. So the big, beautiful deal, that's what we want to build.
That'll be the biggest focus in the next 100 days?
I think the next period of time, I think my biggest focus will be on Congress with the deal that we're working on. That'll be the biggest bill in the history of our country in terms of tax cuts and regulation cuts and other things.
I asked President Trump a few questions a short time ago on the South Lawn as he departed the White House heading to Michigan. Good evening. I'm Brett Baer. We're coming to you tonight live from the North Lawn of the White House on this, the 100th day of the second Trump presidency. In a few moments, the president will take a victory lap of sorts, giving a speech in Warren, Michigan. We will take you there live as you look at that live picture. Democrats, meantime, are doing everything they can to oppose the president. The Senate Minority Leader calls it 100 days of hell. We begin with a fair and balanced report. Senior White House correspondent Jackie Heinrich just outside the West Wing. Good evening, Jackie.
Good evening, Brett. The first 100 days have been shaped by executive action, but much of the next 100 days will depend on legislation, and officials acknowledge that's as much a key as the trade deals in getting the economy where they want it to be. The White House somewhat on defense, highlighting the economy Tuesday as President Trump marks his first 100 days in office with mixed reviews.
The press is not talking nearly enough about the positive impact of President Trump's deregulation campaign. And investments from the biggest companies and countries in the world are pouring in. Fits and starts of tariff policy impacting markets, consumer confidence, and the president's polling.
I think one thing that has been a little disconcerting for the markets is, President Trump creates what I would call strategic uncertainty in the negotiations. I think the aperture of uncertainty will be narrowing, and as we start moving forward, announcing deals.
The Treasury Secretary dismissing concerns Americans could see empty shelves. The Port of Los Angeles reportedly forecasting a 35% decline in cargo arrivals as soon as next week. Bessent says many retailers pre-ordered.
I wouldn't think that we would have supply chain shocks.
But the White House did not take kindly to Amazon's plans to display tariff impacts on product prices.
This is a hostile and political act by Amazon. Why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest level in 40 years?
Amazon says the team that runs our ultra-low-cost Amazon Hall store considered the idea of listing import charges on certain products. This was never approved and is not going to happen. But a phone call from President Trump to Jeff Bezos made sure of that.
Jeff Bezos was very nice. He was terrific. He solved the problem very quickly. And he did the right thing.
Officials say a trade deal with India is close. As for progress with China,
no, not an update. No, not an update.
The administration looking to Congress to deliver the rest of the economic puzzle with tax cuts and deregulation.
I think by the third and fourth quarters, that's really going to kick in.
Officials here say the tax cuts will also play a role in reviving domestic manufacturing because they will include plans to fully expense buildings and equipment. And combined with deregulation and cheap energy, they say the U.S. will be a destination for investment, Brett.
Jackie Heinrich, just outside the West Wing. Jackie, thank you.
We have the big, beautiful deal. It's moving along, and I think we're going to have it taken care of. Well, I think either we've done everything or it's in the process of being done. For instance, the border is in great shape. I would say that was my number one thing. We were losing billions and billions of dollars a day with trade, and now I have that down to a very low level, and soon we're going to be making a lot of money. We're going to be reducing people's taxes. As Pope? Yeah. I'd like to be Pope. That would be my number one choice. There you go. How's it been?
President Trump wheeling and dealing on his way to Michigan for a huge rally to mark 100 days in office, which means only 1,361 days to go. For you, Jessica. And the Trump dozer isn't letting up, plowing ahead with border wins, cutting government waste, and driving inflation down. But it hasn't been a cakewalk. According to a new study, ABC, CBS, and NBC have slapped Donald Trump with 92% negative coverage. And yet, despite the nonstop hit jobs, Trump voters are sticking with their guy.
My biggest issue is at the border, and he's killing it. Well, absolutely, everybody that's here illegally should go. I'm not one of these that, oh, the poor person.
I'm really very optimistic, and I know that right now with the tariffs, that there's a little bit of pain. Sometimes you have to go through a little bit of the fire to get to the end of the rainbow.
Haters will always hate. The American people are not fools, and they saw what the first 4 years of Trump, what he did.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 20. I feel safer. I feel more confident. I know who's running the country.
Trump fans are pumped, but Whoopi says he left America in the dumps.
We are very fickle in this country. We forget, you know, you can be mad at one side or the other, but you have to stick with facts. And the facts are, we left good stuff, he has pooped on it.
President Trump also revealing a phone call he had with Jeff Bezos this morning, getting them to back down on a plan to display tariff prices on Amazon.
Great. Jeff Bezos was very nice. He was terrific. He solved the problem very quickly. And he did the right thing, and he's a good guy.
All right, Judge Janine, 100 days. Is Whoopi's analysis accurate?
No, Whoopi's analysis is not accurate, and neither is the mainstream media. I mean, the fact that you've got 92% negative coverage, and I don't recall what the negative coverage was when the president was, when Donald Trump was running for his second term, but I'm sure it was at least that negative. And the American people didn't buy it, and he won. He won by the popular vote, and now Americans are savvy enough to know that they're not going to buy what the press is selling them, because they've seen what it's like when they don't even know who the president is. So I think that the American people, as we heard from those few people, they trust the vision of the president. They are willing to have some short-term pain for long-term gain. But the big issue was the border, and the president has a 55% approval rating on the border, and he is also moving the criminals out. And, you know, 7 out of 10 Americans say the Democrats are out of touch. So while President Trump is doing all that he's done, which is like 140 executive orders, I mean, Joe Biden wasn't even out of bed at the end of 100 days. And so what we're seeing now is a president who's very focused. And this whole thing about the tariff increase in Amazon, you know, I thought that was very interesting, because when you look at the tariff issue and, you know, you want to buy something and then there's a tariff added to it, I, as a purchaser, don't want to buy that. I want to say to myself, because I've already done this with clothing, I say to myself, I'd rather buy what's made in America now. If you're going to put a tariff on it and then you're going to charge me whatever tax you charge me from Europe, I don't want it. So I think that's almost a good thing. And finally, when the media pounces, it doesn't have the sting that it used to have, because people aren't buying it. And finally, I think that when you hear about the good stuff that he's done, and I know Rick Grinnell was just on about a half hour ago talking about all the Americans that have been returned, that have been held as hostages, it's something that gets no press. But he's done some huge things for us.
Do they make Manolo Blahniks in America?
No. I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
So you're going to be paying out the nose. Jessica Tarlov. Do you disagree with anything Judge Janine said?
I do.
Okay.
I do a lot. The American public knows exactly what's going on, and that's why they're soundly rejecting this administration. He has the lowest approval rating of any president of the last 70 years for the first 100 days. His stock market for the first 100 days is the lowest since Nixon. Unprecedented low foreign policy approval rating and economic approval rating. The American public is smart enough to know that their shelves, if they're not already empty, are going to be empty because of tariffs. 69% say he's not focused enough on lowering prices. 62% focus too much on tariffs. 72% think his policies will cause a recession. 64% disapprove of how he's handling inflation. He continues to beat a drum that is making the absolute worst economic music I have ever heard in my entire life. And yes, he's still above water on deportations, but he's underwater in terms of immigration overall, because the American people also know that due process matters. And that when you have an administration that is acting lawlessly, because people who are here undocumented do actually have a right to go in front of a judge and to have their case heard, that Abrego Garcia should be returned. And then if you want to deport him right back out, that is your prerogative. But when I'm listening to the spin about this, 92% negative coverage, And then I think back to how you guys were talking about the Democrats before, when Biden used to get up there and say, no, everything's great, right? And you said, how could he possibly do that? He's saying egg prices are great, gas is great. Take a lesson out of your own playbook and admit that this is going badly. Take the L. The Democrats are up 4 to 7 points on the generic ballot. Do you think that that means that Donald Trump is doing a good job?
Oh, that was a rhetorical question? I just zoned out. I was trying to think of things that are not on the shelves. You said there's empty shelves. What are you talking about? What's not on the shelves that you say is not there?
Well, have you gone into a drugstore?
Yeah, I have, Jessica.
Really?
And everything's locked up because of you.
No.
Baby formula, I remember that wasn't on the shelves.
That wasn't a good one.
No.
So I look at another metric, and that is right track, wrong track. And so I go, the polls are the polls, and they are what they are. And I think the economy is one of the reasons bringing it down. But if you think of right track, wrong track, and where do Americans think the country is compared to a year ago under Biden, President Trump definitely still doing better there. So that is, I would say that is probably one of his best accomplishments of the past 100 days, is showing the stark contrast between what he wants to do and where he wants to take the country compared to the last 4 years, and nothing more stark than that on immigration, indeed. The next 100 days is what is really key. So one thing that might help him is that he unleashed the energy world, but that takes some time to get going. And within the next 100 days, you might be able to see that. Some gas prices have started to come down. Inflation has started to come down. Grocery prices started to come down. But the energy piece of that is super important. Then what he was just talking about when he was in Michigan is that the tax bill is what's coming next. And that's where they're going to have to focus, because people want clarity on the taxes. The Democrats right now, I actually think that there will be several Democrats that vote for this with the president. And I'm looking at, like, for example, Senator Fetterman.
Right.
And you might find a few other congressional Democrats who are willing to go that way, because if you do not pass this tax cut bill, you will have an increase in taxes on the middle class. And nothing polls worse, if you care about polling, nothing polls worse than raising taxes on the middle class right now. So I think he will get that done. And maybe he will be able to call it the big, beautiful bill and sign it. Besant says he wants it by July 4th. That's super ambitious, but maybe they'll get it done.
Greg, I have to say your first 100 days have been great.
They've been amazing, haven't they?
They really have.
I fulfilled all my promises.
You have.
That's why I'm wearing white.
Before Labor Day.
Exactly. You know, I'm wearing white because I'm a good guy. And I'm going to do the Democrats a solid today. Because what they're doing is understandable. 100 days, if a president does things, 100 days of the opposition complains about it. That's the process. But I think you can learn, forget all of the issues, you could learn from how Trump does things. As a Democrat, Democrats have a huge problem right now. It's an orientation problem. So when you watch Trump, what do you see about him that's different than Democrats? He's always looking outward and he's looking up. The Democrats, they're looking inward, they're looking backward, and they're looking around. And that leads to self-obsession and envy-driven politics. This is why they always choose virtue signaling over practical solutions, because that gives you the dopamine hit for the ego. But when you look at Trump and you look at everything he's doing, he's not a politician. He's an adventurer. He wakes up every morning and he wonders, what beast am I going to slay? You know, he's oriented outward. He's a man in the world. He's more likely to engage in the world, take and share risks with other people, meets with people that maybe he's not friends with, willing to solve problems, see what happens. He's never even considered his pronoun. He's never met his inner child. And if you're only his enemy if you want him to be your enemy. But if you put your hand out, he'll take it. He also looks forward and not backward. Problem with the Dems, they're living in the past, obsessing over ancestral oppression and cosplaying 1960s radicals with horrible folk music. They should be thinking about their future selves and do things today that will benefit people later. Treat yourself as a different person. This is why the debt crisis, you know, when you talk about tariffs and all that stuff, it's going to hurt Trump, but he's working for the future self. That maybe 5 years or 10 years from now, we will not have financial ruin. That's the future, not the obsession over the past. The obsession over the past combined with the obsession over identity prevents a path forward. It even demonizes self-improvement. It's like you're seeing articles about how exercise is somehow part of the MAGA culture. Or maybe being prompt at a meeting is somehow white privilege. What's funny and ironic is that MAGA people think it's about the past, make America great again. No, it's about recapturing the sense of adventure and optimism that America is known for. The embracing of the future with the emotions of the past. It's not about going back to the past. It's about remembering the good things that makes your future self happy.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Sure.
With that sweater, are you trying to be the Pope?
Yes, I am. I am still Catholic, by the way.
Oh, that's breaking news.
Yeah, and I used to be an altar boy, so that should count for something.
All right, Jessica, are you reoriented?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the best advice you're ever going to get, the
Forward
reorientation.
Reorient
appreciate
yourself,
it.
Jessica.
A block.
We'll see you next
Positive
block.
for me.
Democrats responding to 100 days of Trump by claiming it's been 100 days of HE double hockey sticks.
Donald Trump's first 100 days have been 100 days from hell. I think if you asked Americans to pick one word that describes Donald Trump's economy and how he's handling it, it would be one word, a 5-letter word, chaos. C-H-A-O-S, chaos. Another 5-letter word is Trump, T-R-U-M-P. Chaos equals Trump. Trump equals chaos.
Wow, that is a good speechwriter. Yeah. Chuck Schumer taking heat from Democrats for not going hard enough on Trump, but Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker isn't holding back. The billionaire Hyatt Ayers turned up the heat, saying Republicans cannot know a moment of peace and calling for mass protests against the administration.
We've got to raise alarm bells to everybody. It's a 5-alarm fire, everyone. It's time to step out of your comfort zone and step out into the streets and speak up and make your voices heard, because that's the only thing that we have. That's the power that we have, and we can stop them in their tracks.
But not all Democrats are trying to be a thorn in Trump's side. President Trump was greeted by Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer on the tarmac before his rally. No more hiding behind binders. She got into the beast with the president and even spoke at his event with the troops.
Well, I hadn't planned to speak, but I'm on behalf of all the military men and women who serve our country and serve so honorably on behalf of the state of Michigan. I am really damn happy we're here.
All right, Jessica, let's start with you, because Gretchen Whitmer, a star in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And now, are they friends?
I don't know if they're friends.
But they have a good working relationship, maybe.
I mean, she did hide behind the folder.
I think she was joking.
Yeah, and she's been funny about it since then. She knows that she governs a swing state, and also it's an event for the troops. What would it say if you wouldn't show up for something like that? So, and by 2028, a lot will have happened.
So she's so much better than Pritzker in your mind?
No, she's not. They're both fulfilling different functions, and no matter where you fall on the Democratic ideological spectrum, you want to see your elected representatives pushing back. That is clear in every single survey, and that does not mean violence. And he was very clear about that, saying this has to be peaceful protest. But there was this one example that I think really showed the power of showing up and marching. There was in Sackett's Harbor, New York, which is dairy country. Trump won it, but huge margins. An undocumented woman, her 3 children, were picked up by ICE erroneously. They actually had a warrant for someone who lived within the same Wi-Fi zone as this family. And the town rallied on their behalf. 1,000 people came out and marched for them, including a lot of Trump supporters. And ICE returned them, even after Tom Homan had defended the decision. So there is power in your voice. They were completely peaceful, but they showed that this isn't the way that we do things in America, and that innocent people shouldn't be swept up in what they're doing. So that's the kind of stuff that Pritzker's talking about.
But Judge, you come from that part of the world, but sounds like, I didn't know about this story, but it sounds like it was fixed.
Yeah. And that's the whole point. Look, I think Gretchen Whitmer had a chance to set the tone for the Democrats. I think that, you say, of course, she's there because of the troops, but there are some Democrats who wouldn't be in the same room with Donald Trump. Let's not deny that your party's freaked out that much about Donald Trump. But I think that she did the right thing, and I think that wanting to work with the president to bring back manufacturing to Michigan is a smart move. Okay. And, the Dems, like Pritzker, I don't know what his issue is. He's another white male billionaire that they hate. And now, I can't imagine people getting behind him. But I don't understand what's with the Democrats. Why wouldn't they be interested in getting men out of women's sports when women are being injured? Why wouldn't the Democrats be willing to get Tren de Aragua and MS-13, foreign terrorist organizations who invaded this country, out of this country? Why wouldn't the Democrats want to protect the American people and make sure that criminals aren't given sanctuary in their cities that they pay taxes on? So, I'm kind of tired of hearing about, all of the things that Trump's doing wrong. Trump is doing what he was elected to do, and that is to get rid of the illegals who are criminals, to close down the border to other people who are trying to come through, and to try to solve the economy. And you know what? If you think he's going to do it in 100 days, then, you believe in a fairy. But that he can't do it in 100 days. But he's a businessman, and he's trying. The Democrats, all they have is hate, and more hate and lawsuits. And the Supreme Court, their lawsuits are so outrageous. The Supreme Court had to come out and say, look, you local district court federal judge do not think you have a power equivalent to a president to set foreign policy and get an injunction across the entire United States. Democrats are going to get that through their head.
Greg, when Pritzker says Republicans cannot know a moment of peace, are we supposed to think that he means that you're just going to get prank calls?
That's usually what he says before he uses your bathroom. Look, I disagree with the judge. I think a lot of people can get behind Pritzker. He's calling for a mass protest. I think he can do that on his own. He feels the activity in his bones. That could just be the stress from his morbid obesity. He's a charlatan. I love Chuck Schumer. I just hope he lives forever. So this is his brilliance. Chaos and Trump, 5 letters. You know what else has 5 letters? Chuck. His head is so far up his ass, he has to communicate through farts. Anyway, I get it's the opposition. The opposition party has to do this. Jessica's right. You're supposed to push back, but they've chosen to double down on the hysteria that they already exhausted before Trump won. The result is no one's going to hear you. And the worst part about it is you come out for things that you're against, but you can't articulate what you're for. It's kind of like the Dems are like a guy who gets dumped by his girlfriend because he's a jobless, drunken oaf, but trashes her new boyfriend because he's boring and has a job. And she should take him back, even though he's still a drunken, mooching oaf. Except now he has an acoustic guitar and can sing songs about it.
Van Jones had a little something to say to Democrats. Let's play that.
You need a fire alarm and you need a fire station. A fire alarm is somebody who can raise the concern level in an appropriate way. And we also need a fire station. Who's going to put out this fire? The opposition is important, but what's the proposition? What are Democrats offering besides outrage to Donald Trump and Elon Musk? That has to be worked out.
Anybody listening to him?
No. They should listen to what happened in the Second Punic War, Dana.
Oh.
Judge was there. She remembers.
Oh, why, Jesse? Why?
Hannibal was closing in on Rome. He had just crossed over the Alps and was wreaking havoc. He was relentless, he was ruthless, and he was setting the pace and the tempo. And so they had an emergency Senate hearing in Rome, and they said, we need a new strategy. And so Scipio Africanus came up with the new strategy. They are going to take the fight to Hannibal in his own territory. 120 ships set sail with 30,000 Roman legions from Sicily to North Africa, and they just ravaged Carthage. The Carthage Senate recalled Hannibal back to North Africa, and after that strategic retreat, his forces were depleted. They met on the battlefield, and the Romans won, saving the empire. Trump did the same thing. What is he doing? He's not fighting the Democrats on his own territory. He's taking the fight to the universities. He's taking the fight to sanctuary cities, to the federal bureaucracy, to DEI, big law, and trans. And what are the Democrats doing? Their army's divided. They're cowering in a fetal defensive posture. And their only strategy is to hope that Trump fails. Jessica, if you know anything about ancient Rome, hope is not a strategy.
There's nothing more dangerous than a guy who just listened to a podcast on Rome.
Not a podcast.
Johnny did the research.
McRaven's new book.
Yeah, I knew it. And what was my role?
You were in the Senate, weren't you?
You know what? I had faith that you could pull that off.
I landed.
Yeah.
You did.
I mean,
All right, ahead,
think
Michelle Obama ramps up fear over President Trump's most popular issue with the voters.
Live from Texas, this is the Will Cain Show. A busy day, a busy show, as we once again expect to join President Donald Trump today as he joins the Michigan National Guard. That's because it's been a busy 100 days in his second term at the presidency. That is a milestone I'm sure he's going to mention today with the Minnesota National Guard. But before we do so, before we join him there in Michigan, let's review where we've gone, where we are over this flurry of activities in the first 100 days. President Trump has signed 142 executive orders. In response, there have been 17 nationwide judicial injunctions. 65,000 people have been deported, illegal immigrants deported from the United States, 26 hostages released. DOJ is estimated to have implemented $160 billion in savings. President Trump has met with 11 world leaders and conducted 5 press conferences, signed 5 bills into law. Promises made, promises kept on many of the important promises he made throughout his campaign for the presidency. At the top of that list, no doubt, is illegal immigration and securing our national border. This is what President Trump promised on his way to the presidency.
We will close the border. We will stop the invasion of illegals into our country. On day one, I will stop the migrant invasion. We will begin the largest deportation operation in the history of our country. My administration will deliver justice for every family whose loved one has been stolen from them by migrant crime.
Where are we now today? Illegal border crossings have fallen to a brand new low. In March of 2025, just over 7,000 people crossed over the border. The previous 4-year monthly average, 155,000. A+, promise kept on illegal immigration and the border. How about the economy, inflation, and jobs? Here's where we stand today when it comes to inflation. January, inflation was down 3%. February, 2.8%. March, 2.4%. That's the year-over-year inflation under President Trump. Jobs? Well, in December 2024, President Biden lost 10,000 jobs. Roughly 13 months later, President Trump lost 5,000 jobs. Then the Trump agenda, you would presume, gains effect. By February, the economy had added 8,000 jobs. In March, added another 1,000 jobs. Still, there is the looming question of what will be the effect of tariffs. President Trump promised that tariffs could help curb the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigration, bring back manufacturing jobs, pay down the debt, reducing taxes, and stopped being ripped off on the world stage. Markets have teetered back and forth, a roller coaster through the first months of President Trump's tariffs. How to respond? We'll wait and see over the long term the effects of tariffs. But over the short term, there's no doubt it's caused a measure of uncertainty, and uncertainty is hard on economies. It's hard on companies and CEOs that plan not just days, weeks, months, but years out. That was highlighted by Maria Bartiromo.
Markets are down since Inauguration Day, and that's because we've had a lot of uncertainty. I said, Mr. President, business needs clarity. They have to talk to shareholders. They have to make their investment plans for the year ahead. They need clarity. He said, well, tariffs may go up. They may go up. They're not going to go down. I said to him, that's not clarity. That issue is front and center and has been front and center ever since. It's about clarity. The business community, the stock market, investors, they all want specifics. They can't have specifics yet because they're in the middle of this. We're in it.
We're in it. And while we're in it, in the short term, there is a ton of uncertainty. We'll see if Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's vision of reimagining the global economy, bringing manufacturing jobs back home to America, can be implemented over the long term. Now, that's some of President Trump's first 100 days. How have the Democrats responded in those 100 days?
This is what kicking the out of fascism looks like.
Total bull. Absolute bull. I don't swear in public very well, but we have to Trump.
Well, I think the political scientists have a term for the first 100 days we've seen, and they call it a show.
If you could speak directly to Elon Musk, what would you say?
Off.
When not cursing, they've been choosing their fighters, video game style, putting out memes, trying to get your attention, trying to win with voters. At the State of the Union, they chose to stay seated as Donald Trump honored a 13-year-old cancer survivor, DJ Daniel. And then, of course, there's AOC and Bernie Sanders fighting the oligarchy tour. They are flying around on private jets, gathering crowds, and seemingly gathering the favor of the primary voter of the Democratic Party. But as for the general voter, the favorability rating of Democrats has never been lower. Right now, today, 41%. In July of 2024, that was 47%. It's even worse for Democrats in Congress. So while Democrats look for a message, they look for a strategy, this is earlier today, once again protesting Donald Trump.
They're not dealing with the actual real problems like drug and human trafficking on the border. So it's a lot of.
So is there any strategy? Is there any message? Is there any hope for Democrats?
On this 100th day of President Trump's second term, it is time now to hear from the voters' voices. And at the ready, our panel of voters who span the political spectrum, they are here to share their thoughts on the administration so far. So from day one, President Trump took swift action to follow through on his campaign promises. We know that, immediately signing, and very publicly, too, over 140 executive orders along the way, covering everything from illegal immigration to education to the economy, cultural issues as well. And he overturned more than 100 orders enacted by former President Biden. If you'll remember, Biden had flipped Trump. So in actuality, Trump was like reversing 76 in his own first hours of the inauguration after that. That might have been some of his own that Biden had toyed with. The president has also signed 5 bills into law now, and they include the Laken-Riley Act, named after the Georgia nursing student murdered by an illegal immigrant last year. And he's also facing an unprecedented number of liberal lawfare lawsuits against his agenda. 17 nationwide injunctions and more than 200 lawsuits in just 100 days. The White House, however, is highlighting the progress.
Today officially marks 100 days of promises made and promises kept by President Trump. This has truly been the most historic start to a presidency in American history.
Now, President Trump and this administration here, their success is unprecedented. We beat Trump's first administration on border success. Border numbers are historic low.
Since January 20th, interest rates, mortgage rates are down, gasoline and energy prices are down. We are doing peace deals, trade deals, tax deals, and deregulating.
So, what do the voters really think? I want to hear from our voters' voices now. Joining us today, Maria. We'll start the back row right now to the left. Maria, Bonnie, you can wave if you want. David, Vanessa, all Republican voters there. Andrew and Jay, both Democrats, and Mary Josephine and Dominic are here as independent representatives of their perspective. Great to see you all. So, Maria, I'm going to start with you just on what your expectations were and what the realities are now from what you're seeing with this president.
I think Trump has carried out our expectations for the most part. He's done 100 things for us as soon as he stepped foot into the office. He's carried out on a lot of his promises. I think the next 100 days are going to be very critical for us instead.
Oh, really? What do you want? What do you want to see?
I think we want to see better rates, the tariff situation to be settled. I think people just want everything that he's already given us. However, the prison system and the immigration system, I think everything that he's done has excelled beyond. I mean, we don't have anyone coming through the borders anymore. I think that was big for us.
Yeah. Jay, I'm going to talk with you now as a Democrat about your own expectations, too, for President Trump and what you particularly think you like and what you want to see more work on.
When I think about what I like, I want to be fair and say, yes, the consumer price index is down 1%, or 0.1. However, that masks the fact that food is up 0.4 and 0.5, depending on where we're looking at, and housing is up by 0.2. I think his style of governing that creates chaos, it's leading to destabilization within the global affairs, which is going to lead ultimately to issues within Homeland Security, issues within manufacturing, jobs, all of it.
So when you say destabilization, what exactly do you mean by that?
By that I mean the way that the U.S. has led for generations since World War II, it's not been by just us proudly beating our chest. We had a coalition, and we led as a team with others. We were just in the forefront. We have essentially gotten rid of all of our partners around the world, with the exception of Israel.
That's not true. That's not true. And we know that because we wouldn't be going to summits with this president and able to make tariff deals and all the rest, even with China. They're not considered a partner necessarily. We're not, we're not having a disillusion about that. But definitely we have more friends than you're giving the president credit for. But that's your perspective. And certainly, we've made better friends with Mexico as they put 10,000 troops on the border to help us out with our border crisis. So that's just an example. David, I want to come to you and just ask about the tone, because I tend to hear what you're saying, Jay. I hear it a lot about the tone and the rapid nature of the president. What is your take on it?
Yeah, as a black conservative, there is some concern. I respect President Trump's urgency. Americans are tired of bloated government, endless bureaucracy. But like we saw with Elon Musk at Twitter, there's a fine line between disruption and destruction. We need America to work better, but not broke what's necessarily still working.
Now, you started with black conservative and the role. I mean, I can understand why you'd start there, because there were blacks on every spectrum, in every spectrum of voting, who went with Trump for different reasons.
Right.
But you started there. Why?
Well, that's the lens through which I, see this process. I think that we need smart strength, not just the shock and awe. I mean, he put himself in a bold position. Now I think it's just time for him to refine and push harder.
All right. Dominic, what do you think about that very issue?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what he had to say. What I like most about Trump is that he's doing what he said he was going to do, whether you like or dislike his policies. I think in the past, a lot of politicians said what the crowd in front of them wanted to hear and then did what they wanted to do. This president is doing exactly what he said in rapid speed. He's definitely shaking up the market, which is obviously reflecting that. But I think it is strategic, and he has very smart people in his corner making these moves.
Well, and one thing that he's done, and Bonnie, I'll get a quick response from you, speaking of the markets, because they've been healthier in the last day or so, and we've seen that each week. They'll have some potholes, and then they'll come back, and today we're way above 40,000 on the Dow, for example. This is what the president said he would do. He would make course corrections and go. Do you think the American public is getting that perspective?
I do to a point. I think people are a little bit nervous at this point, but I think we have to give him time. We elected him because we wanted a change. We needed a change, and that's why he was elected into office, to make a difference. And I think, 100 days, he's done great things. He's scared a few people, but I think we need to give him a chance to follow through on his plan, because I do think he's got, like Dominic said, great people in his corner and, smart people, and he's a businessman. He's not a politician, and I think we have to give him a chance to go forward with his plan.
All right, let's get your reaction to this. In spite of whatever rough patches we may have seen, President Trump supporters are standing behind him. Take a look at the numbers on your screen. A new Fox poll shows only 4% of those supporters say they wish they had voted differently. That is a very high percentage of people who maybe, Bonnie, are doing what you're saying, and that is let him cook. Let him do what he needs to do. Vanessa, I see you smiling.
Absolutely. Let him cook. I mean, I'm more than content with what President Trump and his administration are doing. I think as an HR professional, he's been very thoughtful in hiring the right people, putting them in the right roles. And we're just taking a step back to watch things play out. Let him cook, like you said. I've been a registered Republican since 18, first-generation American. And we want to see the country a little bit more conservative in what we're doing so that we always put America first.
Well, I can't wait then to jump to cultural issues, and I'll double down with you. And Mary Josephine, I'll come to you next as an independent joining us today. Vanessa, what is the key cultural issue that you're watching for right now? Because you say you're conservative, so you want to see certain things happen, not just with the economy, but with how we live in this country.
For me, immigration. Remember, I shared first-generation American. My family's from Haiti. We came in the right way. So absolutely, we want our streets safer. We want the best immigrants coming in to help our country excel and amplify what we're doing. But there needs to be a process. It cannot be a free-for-all. And being right here in New York City, the mecca of the world, We need to make sure that's coming through a conservative lens where we protect our city and thrive.
Wow, I see a lot of nodding, Mary Josephine.
Well, I mean, it would be nice to look at going to church on Sunday as a normal thing like we used to do years ago. I mean, I feel like we've pulled away from doing things that are probably normal because it's looked down upon. You can go to school and it's really difficult to say if you believe, let's say, something that the Bible says and be forthcoming with it because you're afraid of what the person next to you is going to say. Like we've gone away from just doing things normally. We're putting too much emphasis in trans sports and DEI, and you know, the basic family structure isn't something that is applauded any longer. And I like the fact that Trump is trying to bring that to the forefront and make people feel comfortable again, just supporting their views, whatever they are.
Yeah, and that faith-based nature is certainly something that I even see Democrats tapping into now, as they did their, I don't even know what you call it, the sing-along on the steps. You heard faith talked about and that whole, and you really didn't hear it on the campaign trail as much. So, Andrew, what is your take on where we are 100 days in?
You know, I was recently elected to like the student government of Fordham University, a Jesuit Catholic university. And
congratulations, by the way, young man.
Thank you.
Making his political dreams come true.
A little bit, but I'm concerned because, you know, at a school like this in an international city like New York, I don't just represent Americans, I represent international students, and 4 of my peers had their visas rescinded, and thank God all 4 of them have been reinstated. But I'm just shocked, and I've been in active communication with the administration of Fordham, and I've been shocked that there has been no discussion on why those visas were revoked. There was no collaboration between Fordham University or other universities, or many, or not, I wouldn't say all, but many universities on why these visas were revoked. And the fact that there was none of these students were involved in protests. None of these students, you know, they were stripped away from the right to study and put back. So I'm just a little bit concerned on the process, and if it's too much, you know, too much quick action with, you know, little recourse.
Well, let me point out that what you're talking about was that there was enough process involved such that those people could get redress, that they could go back and get their cases looked at. And I don't know if it works like a HIPAA situation, but they may never share with you personally outside of those individuals. The federal government likely will not open up its books to share with you why they had spoken with those 4 who you know. Protesting is free speech.
Yes.
What the students have been doing in other places, though, like Columbia, that is not protected speech. It is hate speech. Some of it has been violent. So those types of things, I don't think we need to ask the government why you would, you know, single out somebody like a Mahmoud Khalil to take a look at what he's been doing. But with those 4, it sounds like the process worked. But I hear your concerns. And you know, Dominic, I see you nodding. You're one of the independents. I want to know your thoughts on what Andrew has brought up.
Yeah, I mean, listen, over the last few years under the past administration, immigration was the border was an open border. Under this administration, they're going to be vetting everyone they came across and deporting who shouldn't be here. So I don't think it's outlandish or something surprising that maybe some visas are being taken away. And I'm happy they were given back, right? But I think there needs to be a vetting process, and there has to be a process in general, right?
You know what's important about what Dominic's bringing up too, and Bonnie, I'll get your thoughts on this. We didn't have that kind of vetting. They were overrun with people coming at the border. And I remember when I was there 2 years ago, there was not a process more than jumping in the water to help people who couldn't quite swim across the Rio Grande. I mean, you're not vetting at that time. You're trying to save lives. And that's what a lot of our border agents were tasked with, was just the day-to-day survivability of the decisions to come into our country illegally on a whole host of different ways. So what is your take on basically getting down to zero at this point and being able to vet and not being surprised maybe that there's some people in the country that they're a little hard to vet?
I mean, I think this is exactly what President Trump said he would do on day 1, is close the borders, and he essentially did that to make our lives safer. We're citizens, we're here. to make it a better place for all of us. I don't think he. I don't know. I mean, I think that we're here. We're born here. We've lived here, and other people are coming in, and there's a process. And all of us, we're all immigrants here. You know, all of our families came from somewhere else. But there's a way to do things, and we need to protect the people that are here.
All right, let's get to this. We hear a lot in the legacy media about the president's poor polling. I want to take a look at some of the insight into what could be driving that public opinion. A conservative media watchdog analyzed the network news nightly broadcasts from Inauguration Day until April 8th. You're already nodding at me, Mary Josephine, you know what's coming. It found 92% of coverage of the president and his administration was negative. Look at the screen. 92% of anything is a lie. Over that same time period in his first term, that number was 89%. So not too different from the first term, very high. Compare that to their coverage of former President Biden's first 100 days, 59% positive. Despite this, a new poll shows that when it comes to handling the nation's main problems, voters say they trust Trump over congressional Democrats by a 7-point margin. Jay, that sounds like a problem.
It is a problem. I think that there is not a single person that we can look to in the Democratic Party right now to say that that's our leader. However, with that being said, I think taking the one person who's there over a party is also quite dangerous because of some of the things that he's done. Taking away due process from folks is not okay. He's quick to call out when he feels like his rights are being infringed upon, when yet the Fifth Amendment says that every person, it doesn't specify citizens, it says every person shall have due process.
So we don't guarantee constitutional rights to certain illegal aliens, particularly when they are suspected of violent crimes, which is why we have a finalized deportation list. And it's pretty clear. And I think some of the cases that are public now, individuals were on that. So where are you seeing that due process? I mean, to even get to that point, they must have gone through process.
Due process. Okay, so let's look at President Trump as an example. We call him a felon because he has been convicted of felonies. Some of these folks, without the actual due process, do not technically qualify as illegal immigrants because they have never had their cases heard. Now,
well, wait,
with
how
that
did they
being
get
said,
here is the question.
That's fine. But, you know, there is, just like we say when someone is allegedly being accused of something, it's the same process, right? However they got here, due process is what gives them that status of being illegal or not. So without that process, you're essentially just taking up people off of the streets, giving them this without their actual process and deporting them. Now, am I saying some of these people should not have been deported? No.
Do we agree that if you come across our border in an illegal manner that you have committed your first crime?
I believe you are entitled to due process.
That is the difference that I often get between Democrats and Republicans. David, what do you think?
Well, I think we have to speak the facts. A lot of media likes to throw around lies and smoke. The truth is, immigration is Trump's strongest issue. People want a secure border. Now, we can argue about tone, his brassness, and how people feel about when he's carrying out these policies. They may be a little nervous, but the truth is people want a secure border. And you even seen Democrats, and you just seen Hakeem Jeffries say, let me be clear, Democrats want a strong border. So they even have to change their message to what the American people want.
Well, and what's interesting about that is then, and you pointed it out, Jay, it's such a big issue. You have to be unified enough in your party to pick somebody who represents you to carry the message. You are nodding, Andrew.
Yeah, I think a big failure with the Democratic Party in recent elections is, you know, almost a calling to anoint a person. You know, with 2016 clearing the field for Hillary, a similar thing to a lesser extent for Biden, and now with the most recent election with Kamala Harris. I think, you know, a lot of people in my party strongly believe that there should be a new legion of voices, and I hope that this kind of anointing or choosing, doesn't happen next presidential primary. I believe that iron sharpens iron, and that the strongest candidate through debate ultimately comes on top. I mean, the last time that we had a truly open primary was, in my opinion, was in 2008. And look at what happened with Obama. I mean, he was hate him or love him, he was an extremely strong candidate. And I believe that, the only way that we're going to find the next party leader is through, a competition and a discussion of the ideas.
Wow. Well, while you are figuring all of that out, President Trump has had 100 days. and he's been moving along the lines of those things that he talked about. I mean, nearly every day he talked about tariffs, so nothing has really been a shocker. Let's take a big picture polling look here, and it doesn't look great for really anybody. A majority of voters say President Trump, Republicans and Democrats are all out of touch with certain concerns of most Americans. Democrats getting the worst of it, though, at 69%. So, Maria, moving ahead, you mentioned some of the areas that you'd like to see. Specifically, what do you want to see beginning the 101st day?
I think I'm going to go right back into the same focus of immigration as well, because of piggybacking off of what Vanessa spoke about. I'm also a child of an immigrant parent. Both my parents are immigrants, Indian and Pakistani. And a lot of the things that are going on overseas, I understand that, being that I am Muslim. So I do understand that. However, my family worked very hard to be here and to live the American dream and to achieve that. And they had to go above and beyond to make sure that they could have that here. So to see others come into this country and do whatever they want, even with education, going to college, getting grants, getting scholarships, some of these things are just being handed out to other people.
You know, at one point we had thousands upon thousands of people coming across our border. There was no vetting process. And the Biden administration actually didn't fake it and say that there was at that point, because we didn't have that many people who could count it and vet them. I mean, they were outnumbered, to coin a term.
Yeah.
But Vanessa, when you talk about coming here the right way, I can understand the disconnect between Democrats and Republicans on this issue. But your family has lived it. You both of your families, Maria, too. So talk with us about what the next move you would like to see this administration, tackle, because that issue is going to continue to be one. He wins on this issue, but Democrats aren't going to lay down forever.
Absolutely. For me, it's continuing to deliver on truth, transparency, common sense. There's such an appetite in our country for that. I wanted to go back briefly on what you were sharing about legacy media. I mean, I think that's why we're seeing such a surge in Gen Z. They're kind of splitting. You're actually seeing a turn towards more conservatism, because you have independent media and podcasts, Megyn Kelly, Joe Rogan, that are really speaking to the American public. We just want the truth. So that's the one ask that I have of President Trump. Promises made, promises kept. Continue to be transparent about that.
That's probably why, for some of you, his boldness, his rapid movement doesn't bother you, because you know what it takes to shake the apples out of the trees and make change. And I mean, if you're raising children, I have 2 teenagers, it's never simplistic. Even when parents give us the ideas of what to do next, it's like, well, it didn't work out that way for me with mine. So it takes time, and he's just not taking that time. He's throwing all the crayons at the wall. I want to just get 2 quick last thoughts. Dominic, I'll come to you.
Talking about the next 100 days, I think the tariffs need to be worked out. We saw during COVID, when the ports kind of shut down, what it did to our supply chain and cost of goods. I agree that he should do it. I agree that we shouldn't be just shoveling money to other countries and not be a fair agreement between us and other countries. But it could affect us in a serious way if this isn't resolved very quickly.
Are you watching some of the latest moves, the difference in tone and movement, maybe a little bit on a public scale?
Yeah.
With certain countries like China?
Yeah, I think. Listen, what he did had to be done. I just want him to wrap it up as quickly as we could, so we don't see too much economic change here in the country.
All right, David.
Yeah. The thing that I would like to see him work on, I think you just pointed it out about the Americans feeling like both parties is out of touch. And let me be clear, Americans have a distrust of institutions overall. So it's not an indictment on anyone. But like the famous strategist said, it's the economy, stupid. So you need to focus on the economy, getting back those 401ks and making sure people have those manufacturing jobs.
There you go. Jay, it'll make you happy. I think that was a Democrat who said that.
I think most of that is fair. Doing things too quickly works in some places, it doesn't work in others.
All right.
Firing people who are taking care of our nuclear silos, that doesn't work. So I want him to do what's best for Americans, period. And I'll leave that up to his team.
Well, you all are fantastic, and I want to thank you for coming and making your voices heard. Congratulations on taking office, young man. All parties considered today on Voters' Voices, so I'm glad and feel blessed to have you here in studio with me. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.